Today we're talking about going beyond human to see what Friedrich Nietzsche had to say about it. Lately we've been talking a lot about attaining a higher consciousness through reading books like Cosmic Consciousness, but I want to take a look at what Friedrich Nietzsche has to say about going beyond human, because as we'll see, as opposed to how a higher type of consciousness is described in a book like Cosmic Consciousness, Friedrich Nietzsche describes going beyond human in a completely different way. And we're going to see that Hyperianism synthesizes both views of the view taken in Cosmic Consciousness as well as that in Friedrich Nietzsche. And of course, we go much beyond these views as well. But you're going to see how we incorporate this idea of going beyond human in the way that Friedrich Nietzsche talks about it, because Friedrich Nietzsche is often described as a nihilist, but he's actually not a nihilist. He hated nihilism. He hated the idea of purposelessness. And in place of a nihilistic world, he introduced the idea of the emergence of a new type of humanity. He said that a new type of humanity would emerge from history, and we are that new humanity. Hyperianism is what Friedrich Nietzsche was anticipating. So today we're going to explore the idea of going beyond human as described by Friedrich Nietzsche and then tied into Hyperianism. So as I said, lately we've been reading about how to achieve absolute consciousness. We've been reading a bit from a book called Cosmic Consciousness by Richard Burke. And we're going to see that Friedrich Nietzsche is talking about going beyond human, but in a completely different way. For example, in the book Cosmic Consciousness, going beyond human is about understanding the universe as a whole, seeing how everything connects, and being able to see the big picture perspective. Now, so for Friedrich Nietzsche, Nietzsche's going to talk about going beyond human, but in a completely different way. It's going to be about becoming oneself, creating oneself, having self-mastery. So as you can see, it's a lot more individualistic. So in Cosmic Consciousness, it's a lot more about the collective or the other, seeing the all. And Nietzsche's conception is a lot more individualistic, self-mastery, self-creation. Now in Hyperianism, we have both views and beyond as well. We go much further. But as you can see, it's important to be able to see the big picture and to be able to care about the collective and wanting to create a world for the collective. But it's also important to have individual self-mastery as well, to be able to be the creator of oneself. And so in Hyperianism, it's not just about the individual, nor is it about the collective. It's about becoming a powerful individual and creating a healthy community and collective at the same time. In Nietzschean terms, it's the maximization of the will to power for both the collective and the individual. It has to be about both, not just one or the other. And that's the problem that humanity runs into time and time again, is they just look at one side of the picture, only a portion of the puzzle. They only get it half right, or a quarter or an eighth or a tenth right. So it's very important to see the big picture and incorporate everything. It's not just about the self. It's not just about the other. It's about the self and the other. But let's start to read Friedrich Nietzsche's conception of going beyond human and how we can understand it in terms of Hyperianism. To get a better understanding of this, I'm going to be reading some excerpts from an article written by Eternalized, which is a really good article, and I believe that they also have a YouTube channel. So if you enjoy them, go check them out. Go check out their channel. They have a lot of interesting videos on philosophy. So let's start off first with the word itself, Ubermensch. So Nietzsche's conception of a new type of humanity, Nietzsche calls the Ubermensch. So the first English translation rendered it as beyond man. So beyond human was the first rendition of the word Ubermensch. Later it was named Superman. However, this promoted its misidentification with the comic book superhero. It's also been called the superhuman and the Uberman. Walter Kaufmann, one of the most important Nietzschean scholars, explains that the closest to the German translation is Overman. We will be using this term although it can also be used in its original German form as well. Nietzsche was a profound admirer of Emerson. Emerson had coined the term oversoul, the title of one of his essays, which may have influenced Nietzsche's choice of the term Ubermensch, making the translation overman doubly appropriate. Nietzsche had translated the original English word of oversoul as the higher soul, which also may have influenced his phrase, the higher man. All right, so a couple things I want to say real quick here. And first of all, so Nietzsche is talking about this new type of humanity. This new type of humanity coming on the scenes, Nietzsche calls the Ubermensch, which means the superhuman, or overman, or beyond human, or beyond man, or beyond human. So this is the word that Nietzsche is going to use for the next step in humanity's development, this Ubermensch. However, I want to just make it really clear that in Hyperianism, we don't use any gender-specific wording. You know, in older books, when people say man, they mean humanity. When they say mankind or the overman or something, they're talking about humanity as a whole, not just men only. But I want to make it very clear that in Hyperianism, it's important that we get away from these gender-specific words. We should use gender neutral or gender inclusive words like humanity. We shouldn't say, you know, beyond man. We should say beyond human. And this might seem like subtle or nitpicking or, you know, trying to be politically correct or something, but it's really not about that. When we use words that are gender specific, even though we know what we mean, these can really take root in the unconscious. And even if you don't think they're influencing you, they can influence the world in a negative direction. They can really sneak their way into the unconscious and subtly direct things towards a genderist society. So it's really important that we use our words very, very carefully. And so it's important when talking in terms of Hyperianism that we use gender neutral and gender inclusive terms. So for example, we shouldn't say beyond man, we should say beyond human, so that we include, you know, men, women, and everyone on the gender spectrum, no matter what one identifies as. So keeping that in mind, but I'm still going to, you know, use the word Ubermensch when it's referenced in this article or when Nietzsche references it, just for ease of communication, so that I read it and how it was written. But please understand and realize that when we talk today in terms of Hyperianism, that we should not use gender-specific terms. They should be gender neutral or gender inclusive. So beyond human, not beyond man. So anyway, continuing, the overman and the free spirit. And remember, I'm just reading it now as how it was written. So keep in mind that when I say overman, it should really be overhuman. So Nietzsche had not come up with the concept of the overman until his later periods in life. However, he had spoken of free spirits, which is to evolve in his later work into the stage Zarathustra, who paves the way for the overman. In one of his early books, Human All Too Human, a book for free spirits, which is a really excellent book, by the way, I highly recommend it, Nietzsche dedicates it to the free spirits who did not exist yet, but he saw them coming slowly. And this is another thing that I want to emphasize. And remember when we were reading Cosmic Consciousness, how I kept emphasizing, look, this book was written 100 years ago, but what it's talking about is us. It's Hyperions. We are the ones that this book was written about. Likewise, what Nietzsche is talking about in talking about the Ubermensch and a new humanity and free spirits who did not exist yet, but he saw them coming slowly. That is us. That is Hyperianism. That is what we are doing right here and right now. We are, and that's why I say you guys need to get excited about this, because you are taking part of history in that we are the emergence of a new humanity. We literally are that. So, you know, again, be excited about this. This is history in the making. We are history in the making. You are history in the making. This movement is history in the making. The free spirit challenges the conventional ways of living and promotes the growth of society. And I want you to really see the difference here, because in a book like Cosmic Consciousness, and then in the way Nietzsche describes it, both books are describing a coming of a new humanity, but you can see they're being described in very different ways. Where in Cosmic Consciousness, it was about seeing the interconnectivity of reality and the evolution of concepts. Here, Nietzsche is talking about it in a much more subjective, individualistic way, about an individual that challenges the conventional ways of living, promotes the growth of society, and as we're going to see, is about self-mastery and overcoming oneself and one's own limitations. Now, that does entail the development of consciousness, but Nietzsche didn't really write about it in that way. But this is why in Hyperianism it's so important to have both perspectives, in that all of it entails each other. And so we're going to talk about, let me just continue here and we'll talk more about that. Not everyone, however, the Overman and the final metamorphosis. So in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. By the way, Zarathustra, if you're not familiar, Thus Spoke Zarathustra is a book that Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, and he wrote it kind of like, almost like a Bible. It was in a story format, it was in a mythos, and it was about Zarathustra, who was this character who was sort of the prophet of the Overman. Zarathustra sort of went around prophesying the coming of the Overman. In other words, prophesying the coming of a new humanity. And so it was written in this story format. The main character is Zarathustra, the prophet of the Ubermensch. And so in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, the Overman is linked with the final metamorphosis of the child. So Nietzsche tells us that there are three metamorphoses for self-overcoming. See the importance on self-overcoming. And these three metamorphoses are the camel, the lion, and the child. So Nietzsche is going to describe the steps in overcoming oneself, or the steps in becoming beyond human. And he's going to describe them symbolically through the symbols of the camel, the lion, and the child. And ultimately, the Overman, or the one that is beyond human, is the final stage of what Nietzsche calls the child. So let's understand, what is he talking about here? The camel, the lion, the child. What does this mean? How are these the steps to going beyond human, etc.? So, not everyone, however, can become a camel. One must first become a free spirit and be willing to step outside of one's comfort zone to carry heavy weights and sacrifice oneself. To debase oneself in order to injure one's pride. To let one's folly shine out in order to mock one's wisdom. In other words, Nietzsche suggests that when we feel proud of ourselves, we are to take on even more weight to show that we are not that great after all. We need to humble ourselves. So basically, in conception of Hyperianism as well, if we're understanding it through that lens, what this is really about is, okay, so we're starting from the very beginning. So let's imagine the average human, and let's say that they're indoctrinated into a religion. So the first step is realizing that you don't know everything. To realize that you don't have all the answers. To realize that, hey, and in that specific human's case, like, wow, I need to be able to realize that my religion has flaws, and I need to be able to take on the weight of stepping outside of my comfort zone. That means going beyond my reality tunnel and being able to look at other perspectives. So this idea of the camel is taking on weight, and the weight of acknowledging that you don't have the answers and being able to step outside of your comfort zone. Most people can't do this. When people are normally born into their specific reality tunnel, such as some sort of religion or even some type of scientific empiricism, they don't step outside of their reality tunnel. They are trapped in it forever. So you can see, even in this very basic first step, this is breaking beyond what the average human does. Stepping outside of one's reality tunnel, taking on the weight of understanding that you don't know everything, that your reality tunnel doesn't provide all the answers. So the lion is the next transformation. So this is the next step. He is one who wants to take on freedom and must utter the sacred no to all tradition and rules that previously kept it fettered, chained up, restricted. So the next iteration after one steps out of one's comfort zone is the lion. And this is someone who says no to tradition, no to rules, no to everything that you've been taught, no to everything that society has told you, no to everything that culture has told you, no to everything that religion has told you, that tradition has told you, that your family has told you, saying no, and realizing that all of these fabricated and false rules that tradition and religion and society and culture have conjured up and falsely fabricated are nothing but chains holding you down. So this stage is all about destruction and annihilation. Destroying all, in yourself, all rules, all tradition, eliminating that in yourself. Saying no. The final transformation, characterized by play and creativity, is the child. Having uttered the sacred no to reject everything that came before, the child shouts the sacred yes that affirms life. It is a new beginning without any burdens or spirit of heaviness. So you have this idea of once you have said no and destroyed all the limiting factors within yourself, one becomes the child. So you have this, do you see the difference? You have the camel that takes on the heavy weight of, oh wow, what I might think is true might not be true. That's the heavy weight, the heavy burden. Then you go into the lion. The lion is a devourer, a destructive creature that destroys. And so it's the destruction of one's old reality tunnel. And then the child symbolizes the birth of the new. You are now being born as a new person, unfettered and unchained by what has been enclosing you in that limiting reality tunnel. You are now free to create yourself. After achieving the final metamorphosis, one can become who one is. You're no longer shaped by culture or society or religion or by tradition or rules. You are shaped by yourself. This doesn't mean you don't want to follow any rules. This doesn't mean you want to have absolute anarchy. But it means one doesn't just follow traditional rules of religion, etc., for no reason whatsoever, just because some book says so. Right? It doesn't mean you want to go out and start killing people and stealing. That's not what that means. It means that one has to realize that the false rules imposed by one's old reality tunnels on how you should live your life are fabricated, and you can choose for yourself. So the child is the one who now can create oneself. After achieving the final metamorphosis, one can become who one is. The mind of the child is one who is immersed in the moment and filled with wonder and playfulness, giving way to pure creativity. One can create one's own values and one's own reality. One can now become an overman or beyond human. And this final stage is finally stepping into becoming beyond human. And this is where we are at as Hyperions. Now, I want to really emphasize here that these points are talked about a lot in my book, The Metaphorical Suicide, but I want you to see how it's incorporates not just Nietzsche's view, but also the view of creating higher conceptions of reality and incorporating reality as a whole. So Nietzsche's view is an extremely powerful view, but it's only part of the puzzle, only part of the equation. It's very individualistic and less about the collective and the community and less about the evolution of consciousness and understanding the whole. And both are very important. So just for example, in my book, The Metaphorical Suicide, it talks about the creation of the analog all, which means being able to see all reality as one and seeing the interconnectivity of the universe. It's an evolution of your conceptualization of reality. It's stepping into a higher consciousness. If you want to know more about that, you can check out my book, and you can also check out the videos that I've done in a playlist called Cosmic Consciousness. Check that out. But that's all about achieving absolute consciousness. Now, but also, I want to mention in my book, The Metaphorical Suicide, is, and I'm not just trying to like plug my book, but I mean, hey, you know, go read my book if you want to. It's a good book. But I wanted, what I'm really emphasizing here is the comparison between Nietzsche's views and Hyperianism, because you'll notice that in what we're talking about right here, Nietzsche's talking about, you know, the camel, the lion, and the child, which is about acknowledging that your reality tunnel is insufficient, then destroying everything that holds you back, and then becoming born into something new where you can be free to create yourself. Well, this is exactly what my book, The Metaphorical Suicide, is about. It's called The Metaphorical Suicide because one destroys oneself, one kills oneself, one has and through that, not literally, it's the metaphorical suicide, one is destroying all values within oneself, but there's a very specific process for that, having to do with Rene Descartes' method of doubt. Do you see how in Hyperianism we synthesize all things together? We're synthesizing Nietzsche's ideas, we're synthesizing Cartesian ideas, so many different ideas, all filtered and synthesized through logic and reason. So it's about destroying oneself so that you can be free to create yourself. But it's not just about that. It's also about attaining absolute consciousness, where one then understands one is part of a collective whole and must transform the world. And here is why this is very important, okay? Because in Nietzsche's conception, you want to, you know, you destroy all values and then you are free to create yourself and impose your own values, right? That's essentially what Nietzsche is saying. And that's a very important point, one element of becoming beyond human. But if you just have that, it can result in disaster. For example, why not just go out and start enslaving people if you have the power? Why not become a rich billionaire and enslave the rest of the world? Why not do that if you're all about, you know, why not? If you've destroyed all rules and traditions and you're just about empowering yourself, why not go out and do that? So you see in Hyperianism, this is why it's important of also achieving absolute consciousness. Because when you achieve absolute consciousness, you know that from the absolute perspective, we as individuals form a collective, a monadic collective of individual monadic minds, but taken together, we form the absolute, or one mind. So we know to harm another is really to harm ourselves. So when we are now creating ourselves and creating our own rules, we know that we need to create rules that also not only empower ourselves, not only that maximize our own will to power, but maximize the will to power of the collective as well, because we know that we are the collective. And so, of course, we're not just going to go out and enslave the world. We're not going to go out and murder people. We're not going to go out and you know, enslave people via capitalistic means, because we know that when we degrade the collective, we're ultimately degrading ourselves, because we are the collective, and we know that through having attained absolute consciousness. So do you see why it's important to have both? Nietzsche's philosophy is incredibly important. But do you see, like, for example, why we talk about having both perspectives. In Hyperianism, it's the three perspectives: the avatar, you as a body and an ego; the monadic perspective, you as an eternal being, an individual monadic mind; and then the absolute perspective, which is us as the collective, as one mind. It's important to have all of these integrated and working together. And then, yes, one does go through that process. In Hyperianism, this is the metaphorical suicide of stepping out of one's reality tunnel, using the method of doubt to destroy all that can be doubted, all religious and traditional values, and then creating oneself according to reason. According to reason, not some arbitrary definitions of whatever whim you may have, but according to reason. And as Hegel showed, reason reveals us to be a part of a collective. So once again, do you see how now we're throwing Hegel into the mix? And the reason why I'm emphasizing this is I really want you to see how Hyperianism works. We're having a mix here of Descartes, Cartesianism, Nietzscheanism, Hegelianism. So Nietzsche, Nietzscheanism, Descartes, Cartesianism, Hegel, and Hegelianism. We're having a synthesis. And not only that synthesis, but going beyond that as well and incorporating, modern ideas, ontological mathematics, and ideas from why I don't have time to go into all the different areas we go into, but all different areas, all guided by logic and reason, guided, filtered, synthesized through logic and reason to create the ultimate self-transforming and evolving system that will allow you to go beyond human. And this is what I constantly say, that Hyperianism is designed to give you the tools and to invoke in you what you need to evolve past being human. It shows you how to accomplish the metaphorical suicide. It shows you how to use the method of doubt. It shows you how to organize your mind according to reason. And it begins to show you how to connect disparate subjects together to form one united whole, so you can begin to develop an analog all and achieve absolute consciousness. So you see, it's not enough to just have this Nietzschean idea of self-mastery. Not only must you have self-mastery in Nietzschean terms, but you also must have developed an analog all according to reason to fully develop and bloom into someone that is truly beyond human. Now, of course, all of us in Hyperianism are at different stages. So if you're not automatically there, don't feel bad. You'll get there. You'll get there. You just have to work at it. It's like if you're just starting school, don't be disappointed if you don't automatically have a PhD in quantum mechanics and philosophy and psychology the very next day. It takes time. Don't worry about it, but be excited that you're a part of this process and a part of history and forming this rational and highly conscious community so that we can create new terror and create that new world. And so I'm talking about Nietzsche and Hegel and the metaphorical suicide and how one must go through this. And I mean, we're not even talking about so much more like inner star actualization and incorporating ideas of Carl Jung and the shadow self and the mirror self and the power self and the higher self. All that is entailed in going beyond human as well. And, it's really important. The reason why I'm bringing all this up is because I really want to emphasize how all-encompassing Hyperianism is and why it's so difficult when someone goes, well, what is Hyperianism about? It is so complex, and it's complex because it's literally designed to take humanity, to take you to the next step in evolution in consciousness. Literally, not figuratively, not like, some kind of new age woo-woo idea, but literally going beyond human. Really let that sink in, how big that is. These are the tools. This is the method to go beyond human, literally. And it's a very complex system. You can put this in a nutshell to say Hyperianism is about becoming God, or Hyperianism is about bringing humanity, the world, and the universe to the next evolutionary step, you can understand Hyperianism as self-transformation, world transformation. I mean, ultimately, in a nutshell, Hyperianism is about becoming God. We don't worship God, we become God. But you can see, apart from that simple one-liner, it is, a near infinitely complex system. But the reason why it's so complex is because it will give you the tools to go beyond human. So, in Nietzschean, basically what Nietzsche is describing here in this transformation of going from the camel, the lion, to the child, to beyond human, is what we talk about in Hyperianism as the metaphorical suicide. Destroying oneself so one can become free to create oneself. Through reason, of course. So what is the Overman? The Overman is the ultimate form of man. It is one who overcomes nihilism by creating his own values and focusing on this life, not the afterlife. He puts all his faith in himself as an autonomous creator and relies on nothing else. He is the pinnacle of self-overcoming, to rise above the human norm and above all difficulties, embracing whatever life throws at you. He is one who overcomes mediocrity and is not afraid to live dangerously. The Overman shall be the meaning of the earth. To be the master of oneself is the hardest of all tasks and requires the greatest increase in power over oneself, not over others. This is tied with his concept of the will to power, symbolizing self-overcoming. Happiness is the feeling that power increases, that a resistance is overcome. The Overman will thus be the happiest man and, as such, the meaning and justification of existence. So the first appearance of the Overman does not first occur in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, as many believe. Nietzsche, in fact, mentions it in one of his aphorisms of the gay science. The invention of gods, heroes, and overmen of all kinds, as well as near men and undermen, dwarfs, fairies, centaurs, satyrs, demons, and devils, was the inevitable or inestimable preliminary exercise for the justification of the egoism and sovereignty of the individual, the freedom that one conceded to a god in his relation to other gods, one eventually also granted oneself in relation to laws, customs, and neighbors. The overmen of this aphorism seems to be the gods, the demigods, and heroes of the ancient Greeks. To Nietzsche, these overmen appear as symbols of the repudiation of any conformity to a single norm, antithesis to mediocrity and stagnation. To realize one's true self means not to envisage the self which lies deeply concealed within you, but rather the self that is immeasurably high over you. The aphorism is significant because it contains one of the few references to the Overman before Thus Spoke Zarathustra. So essentially what one is saying, the idea here is the Overman is the god that is high above you that one must achieve. Now that doesn't literally mean that there's some external entity like a god. This is a metaphor for like Carl Jung's idea of the higher self. It's the totality of your psyche, but not only the totality of your psyche, but it's the totality of your own psyche that has actualized itself and reached its full potential. So another important thing here is that the one who is beyond human focuses on this life and not the afterlife. And that's something really important that we need to talk about. And if you want to hear me talk about that a lot, look at my playlist on the Secret Gospel of Thomas, because we talk about that a lot here. A lot of people become obsessed with the afterlife, even people who are interested in Hyperianism. And I want to get away from that. That's not correct. You shouldn't be looking at trying to escape from this world or just reach the source or something like that. We are creators and transformers. We are gods. We are becoming God. What do gods do? They create and transform. They don't escape and run away, like a lot of Eastern religions and New Age teachings, like Buddhism, that wants to escape and reach nirvana and detach. That's self-diminishing, self-annihilation, and self-negation. True gods are self-affirming, self-creating, self-transforming, and world-creating and world-transforming. They're not seeking to escape and run away. So we are here to transform ourselves and create new terra. So that's what's really important to understand with regard to Hyperianism. Get away from this escapist mentality and realize that we are here right now and that life is like a video game, and we are here to transform ourselves and transform the world. We are here to build our kingdom of heaven here on earth. So we are here to transform the world, transform the universe, transform ourselves, become all-powerful as an individual and a collective. We are not here to escape and run away. So make sure you get rid of that mentality. I see a lot of people, even some Hyperians who are obsessed with escapism. They just want to get out. They just want to go to the source. They just want to, shut their eyes. But we are here to evolve and grow and learn as an individual and as a collective. And I get it. This world is really shitty right now, but it's only shitty because we haven't come together to transform it. Once we come together and transform it, we can create it into a brilliant, luminous world where it's designed to actualize the potential of the collective and the individual. And that's our creation of new terra, that unconquerable citadel on the hill. And so get away from this escapist mentality. That's not what we're about. If you're escapist, maybe Buddhism or New Ageism is for you. We are not here to escape or diminish. We are here to transform. We are here to become gods. We are eternal beings, and we shall exercise our powers upon ourselves, upon the world, and upon the universe. We are creators. We are destroyers. We are the all. So to be master of oneself is the hardest of all tasks and requires the greatest increase in power over oneself, not over others. And that's very important, to have mastery over oneself and not trying to enslave others. And that's why it's really important to incorporate the absolute perspective and develop an analog all, so that you aren't being selfish, but you are focusing on both yourself and others. Really important to understand that. You don't want to only focus on yourself, and you don't want to only focus on others. I see a lot of people making this mistake. A lot of people who take certain paths, nihilistic paths, satanic paths, a lot of even occult paths who don't understand it very well, take a very individualistic way. Like, they don't care about anything except, I want to be super successful, and there's nothing wrong with being successful, but that's all they care about. They just care about, monetary gains, business gains, etc. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. Perfectly fine with being successful. That's great. But that's all they care about. And on the other end of the spectrum, I see a lot of New Age teachings. I see a lot of teachings in spiritualist communities that are all about the other. They're like, service to other, service to other. Service to self is bad. That's negative. Only service to other. And then that's equally as damaging, because you want to be able to cultivate and create yourself as well. You want to be service to self and service to others. You don't want to be negative or positive. You want to be synthesized. So it's another important thing to take away from Hyperianism. It's not about just yourself, and it's not about just about others. It's about both. It's about the individual and the collective. That's why we say we are the one and the many. From the absolute perspective, we are one universal mind that particularizes itself through a multiplicity of monadic minds that then experience each other locally in a local world through avatars, through bodies. And then finally, one thing I want to say here, it says that the overman thus will be the happiest man, and as such, the meaning and justification of existence. Now, one thing I want to point out here is that attaining a higher level of consciousness isn't necessarily this joyous and happy thing where you're just constantly going to be full of happiness and positivity all the time. What it is extremely rewarding, but that can have a lot of trials. You know, some people say ignorance is bliss, and that's kind of true in a point. And I want you to kind of think about it like this. If you think about the movie The Matrix, people who are plugged into the Matrix are kind of very ignorant. But then look at someone who gets unplugged, like Neo. Now, is Neo automatically super happy at what he finds? No, Neo finds out that he's in a world that's been enslaved by machines. And so does that necessarily come with a lot of happiness? No. But what does it come with? It comes with truth, clarity of reality, and reward. Why reward? Because Neo is then able to maximize his capacities and become superhuman. He gains all these godlike abilities. So likewise, when you step into a higher consciousness, it's not necessarily all flowers and happiness. You are seeing reality as it truly is. And guess what? We live in a really shitty world, and that can be very difficult to deal with. It can be very hard as you understand reality through what it is, but it also becomes infinitely rewarding as you are able to actualize yourself and transform yourself and go infinitely further than you would have been able to go otherwise. You understand the truth of existence, the truth of what you are, the truth of where you are, and ultimately we can overcome these difficulties by establishing a new Hyperion world, a new world order, a Hyperion future where we build new Terra. And when we create that new Terran society, it won't be this horrible world anymore. It will be this beautiful world, this world where we are all gathered together in a hyper-conscious community, and where we are all working on creating the best of all possible worlds for ourselves and others as we create that new society. So we're going to talk a lot about Nietzsche because Nietzsche is extremely important in Hyperionism. But as you know, Hyperionism incorporates many different philosophies. And the Nietzschean aspect is the aspect, Nietzsche is the destroyer. That's what Nietzsche is really about. Nietzsche is about destroying all traditional, moralities, traditional rules, and really being able to free yourself up. But it's also very important to cultivate absolute consciousness through logic and reason, develop an analog all, so that you are really able to understand how to navigate the world in both an individual and collectivist way. It's about both. And like I said, I describe this a lot in my book, The Metaphorical Suicide. This whole idea that Nietzsche talks about in Hyperionism, this is known as the metaphorical suicide. And anyone who wants to become Hyperion has to engage in the metaphorical suicide so that they can destroy all their old faulty programming and then be free to create themselves through logic and reason, so that we can all be on the same page in that rational center, that rational source. And just as an FYI, I know you guys know this, but I just want to clarify. Remember, the metaphorical suicide is metaphorical. Don't harm yourself, don't harm others. We are extremely opposed to actual literal suicide. Don't do that. That's very bad. It's a metaphor for destroying your old self so that you can be free to thus create your new self. So ultimately, what do we strive to do? We strive to create a new society. And as you can see in all these different things that we have been reading, it is the anticipation of a new humanity that will emerge. And so, has that been accomplished? We are accomplishing that right now. What all these books have been talking about, we are accomplishing, we are bringing into actualization. They talk about a new humanity being birthed. This was taught, we saw this in my book, not my book, in the book Cosmic Consciousness. We're seeing this in Nietzsche's idea of the Ubermensch. We're seeing this in Hegel's idea of absolute spirit and a humanity that understands this. We understand, we see this in Teilhard de Chardin's work and the creation of the noosphere. All of this anticipation of a new humanity, we are that new humanity. So let us go out and transform the world according to our will, which is, of course, the will of the universe, the will of the Absolute, because we are the Absolute. So our will be done, our kingdom come. I want to give a big shout out to all my supporters on Patreon, especially our top supporters, Kurekumo, Naruda, Rutfu, Renaissance Fairy, Jordy, and Liam. All you guys are amazing. Thank you for your support. If you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon, and this will give you access to things like our weekly secret live streams and my lecture notes, a lot more. And it's the best way to support my work with all the deplatforming going on YouTube and Facebook. It ensures that I will continue to be able to create, so consider supporting, and thank you to everyone who does support.